Hi everyone, I'm Pari. Welcome to Living the Best Life with Eddie Stone, founder and CEO of Touchstone Essentials. Hello, Eddie.
Hello, Perry. Wonderful to have a chance to be with you this evening.
Yes, I'm happy to have you here too with us today. Anyway, let's talk about vegan today, about the food for vegan, or maybe become popular for every people now, about Impossible Burger or Beyond Meat. Yeah,
Okay, are happy to do that. They are hot topics here in the States for sure. I mean, you see them traditional fast food restaurants like Burger King, which you
yes.
may be familiar with, and lots of places at my local grocery store. You see them in there, so it's definitely a very popular subject right now.
Uh-huh. But here now in Thailand, we don't have like Beyond Meat or Beyond Burger in Burger King's or McDonald's yet. We have in some like a special restaurant and another one that pretty new. But we don't know much about ingredients, I mean, I am one of vegan, so I would like to know more about this. Could you please share with us?
Sure, I'd be happy to. And it's interesting because just because of the work I do, right? I have some friends that have sent me texts and people that are asking questions. And even my wife and we've had some discussions about it because it's an interesting thing to think about. So for the listeners, let me give you just sort of a general understanding of these two products because they're the two major burgers or two major meatless burgers, but I'm sure we'll see lots of other competition, in the months ahead, just based upon how popular it is, right? I mean, it's very, very popular. So let's start with the Impossible Burger. So the Impossible Burger, the primary ingredients are soy protein concentrate, coconut oil, sunflower oil, and then what's listed as natural flavors. Now, that's a pretty loose description of what might be in the product. Knowing labels like I know, I'm not saying that that's something we have to be concerned about, but I am saying that's a pretty loose description to not be more specific than that. And those two things those four ingredients, along with water, are what make up 98% of the material content or the weight of an Impossible Burger. The other 2% is a series of potato proteins, yeast extracts, synthetic vitamin E, B1, vitamin B6, riboflavin. So there's a whole sort of handful of ingredients that make up less than 2% of the label. And for anybody that's kind of curious about it, you can go and look at that. The one thing that kind of stands out about the Impossible Burger, it's the one because of the type of soy protein concentrate that's used along with some other soy ingredients, it mimics bleeding. So when you buy it and you heat it up and you put it onto a bun or a plate, it's going to create a red juice that, you would think of it like you would a burger that you cooked, say, very rare. And so it gives people that feeling of it bleeding. And I have tasted it, and it doesn't taste like a hamburger to me, but it tastes very close. I mean, I've had enough vegan food in my life that I sort of know what vegan food tastes like, but it gives the appearance of it. I understand that if you grill it, you can create grill marks on it like you might do a piece of meat. And there's a lot of people that, they don't think a whole lot about this type of thing that seem to think the product tastes good.
Yes.
And I think an indication about that is you see a place like Burger King, which is one of the top 3 or 4 national fast food chains, I think, here in the States, maybe around the world. I don't know that for certain, but if you see someone like that, selling that product, it's clearly popular. And I think they're also the ones that have created a Impossible Chicken. Now, I could have that wrong. That could be the Beyond people, but I believe they have an Impossible Chicken as well that some Kentucky Fried Chicken chains in the U.S. have been trying. And as I understand it, the 3 or 4 locations that tried it actually sold out. So the one thing I think that is important to recognize is there's a clear indication from the popularity that this is something the public is looking for. Now, it could be that it's a novelty, and so we don't know how long this would last, but at least currently that's the case. Now, let's talk for a minute about Beyond Meat, or sometimes it's called Beyond Burger. Now, that product is similar, except primarily it's pea protein isolate instead of soy. So that's two very distinctive qualities of it, because one is going soy-based and one is going pea protein-based. And then it's got canola oil and refined coconut. And so just like the other one, combined with water, those three ingredients would make up 98% of the weight of the burger. And then less than 2% is all kinds of things like bamboo, cellulose. And that should not upset anyone. When I say cellulose, people tend to think of something like sawdust, but in this case, it's just referring to the bulk material of the bamboo plant. And that's something that can be used to add bulk and fiber to any type of product. Now, I'm not saying in this case, I'm not trying to make a commentary on it, good or bad, but that's not something that should frighten people. It does have yeast extract as well, salt, sunflower oil, and then a series of vitamins. Because one thing to consider is that with both of these products, they're what we refer to on this show and nationally as ultra-processed foods. So these are lab-made. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about this. There's nothing about this that resembles nature. It doesn't resemble what soy is like in nature, and it doesn't resemble what pea protein is like in nature. And so these are lab-born products, and it's really I almost think of it like when I was growing up as a kid, I remember thinking of astronaut food, right? Powdered food that when they went into space, they ate and things like that, but it's all manufactured. And so in these cases, this is really very much all manufactured foods. So is it good for you? You know, I think that's a big question, because we don't know long term if a person were to replace all of the protein in their diet with these kind of manufactured proteins over a long period of time. We don't really have any kind of answer about what that would mean. But I think if we say, setting aside the concept of it being lab made, and we said to ourselves, well, if someone were replacing a fatty, juicy hamburger with one of these, then they're likely to be getting less saturated fat, unless perhaps they were putting processed cheese on it or something like that, or mayonnaise. You know, there's other ways that they can add fats to this. And so they're getting less of those saturated fats. And so in that respect, if we had a cardiovascular surgeon or a doctor on here, and they had a patient with cardiovascular disease or elevated cholesterol or elevated triglycerides or things like that, they might say, well, I think this is a better alternative if that person is really focused on having a meat-like product, whether real meat or a substitute. So in that regard, at least a consumer has a choice, right? They can choose. And if both of these products are vegan products. So in that respect, you know, there's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. Now, the people at Beyond Meat had some controversy, because while it's a vegan product, they did say that in their early stages, they did some animal testing with the protein. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean that it was cruelty. We don't know that. It may have just simply meant that they were feeding the protein to animals to see the reaction. But we know that that is one of the things that became controversial for them. And then on the other side of it, the Impossible Burger people, this is the soy burger, they do have their product certified halal as well as kosher. The Beyond Meat people do not. So I basically bring all that up to say that if somebody wants to try this, and you've got specific ways that you eat, you know, adhering to certain religious laws, or there's certain ethical issues that you're thinking about, you know, you're not just a vegan from a health standpoint, but you're a vegan because of certain ethical beliefs, then you want to read a little bit about the two products so you sort of know, you know, what you're getting into, because they are two separate approaches on the two products. But at the end of the day, for myself, I don't think either of those products are for me, because I'm not looking necessarily to replace meat in this regard with something that's lab made. I'm more of an advocate of somebody eating fresh fruits and vegetables and nuts You can have a vegetarian or a vegan diet in that way that can be healthy if you're eating wisely and taking care of yourself. From those that have heard me on the show, I'm not a vegan or a vegetarian. I eat a little bit of animal protein, a little bit of meat. I don't eat very much, but I do eat some. So sort of full disclosure. And if it were a situation where we're going to have something like this, I'd probably go ahead and have a burger. I mean, that'd just be my choice. I probably wouldn't have a beef burger. I would tend to probably have like a buffalo burger if I were going to go that route, because it's leaner and better in that regard. But if you're looking if you've got sort of beliefs and religious beliefs or ethical challenges with animal products, and these are two viable products, but just to be clear, they're lab made. So it isn't like you're eating out of your garden, and they are filled. Both of these products are completely filled with synthetic vitamins. Ascorbic acid, that ascorbic acid is almost certainly made from fermented GMO corn. So both of these products are going to have ingredients that have origins from a GMO plant. If you look at in the United States, now I can't speak for Thailand and other parts of the world, but I know in the developed part of the world, it's going to be very similar. If you look at things like soy, cotton, or corn, you're talking 90+% of those crops are genetically modified. And they're genetically modified in two respects. One, they're genetically modified to be tolerant of weed killers such as Roundup or glyphosate. So they're designed that the growers can spray those crops with Roundup and not damage them. The problem is there's some residual that shows up, right? And we've even seen that in the US with testing of breakfast cereals and things of that kind. In fact, Roundup has been so utilized here in the States, and this is probably true in other parts of the world, you can even detect it in small amounts in the rain. So it is just pervasive in our society. It's just amongst us, or it's around us, and it's just a thing we have to deal with. It's in the water supply. And it's in the rain, and that's much like just the way, I don't want to get too far off track here, but just municipal water systems where people flush medications and other things down their toilet. There's small trace amounts of pharmaceuticals that we actually find in wastewater that ultimately, when cleaned and processed, gets back into the water supply in cities. And you take a big city like Bangkok, for example, or other larger cities in Thailand, this is going to be true there as well. Just the way people dispose of things like medications, which they shouldn't, right? Everybody should dispose of that separately. So it's something to consider. Now, for those that are trying to think about it from a caloric standpoint, both of these products are going to have about 300 calories per patty. That would be, well, it just depends on how many ounces, but that's going to be very similar to what you would see with, say, 90% lean ground beef on an ounce by ounce basis. So there's no real caloric savings. The biggest savings will be on the saturated fat, although a 90% lean burger is not going to have a lot of fat. They're both going to have about 20, both of these products are going to have about 20 grams of protein. That's not too far different, I should say, from what you would find in the a traditional patty. I actually think the Impossible has slightly less than Beyond, but pretty close in that regard. But you just got to consider that they're highly processed. They're going to contain GMOs. They're not necessarily unhealthy, but they're not necessarily healthy. But if you're a vegan and you're looking to have the sensation and the taste of a burger, this is probably the best opportunity you're ever going to have, because I've had some of the old vegetarian and vegan patties in the past, and they weren't this good in terms of trying to mimic what you find with beef.
I tried them twice, and then because when I tried it, I searched for information here in Thailand. I can't find information in Thai language. Most of the news about Beyond Meat or Impossible Burger is like the IPO, how much the price will be, and the price jumped up, stuff like that. But into ingredients and the benefit, that I don't know, I can't find here in Thai language. Okay, and my concern
would you be able to look up the corporate website for these two companies? Because I have both of the corporate websites do have some detail, but it's all in English.
Uh-huh. Okay, that's fine. But my concern is like you mentioned about soy base, okay, and then yeast extract. Is it good for our body because we already have many kinds of yeast from bread, from stuff like this too?
Yeah, yeast is controversial, I know, for a lot of people, and you hear about people with runaway yeast blooms, and of course, women can have issues with yeast infections, which oftentimes those yeast infections are coming from having a yeast problem in their bowel and a cross-contamination when people go to the bathroom. That's very often how a yeast infection happens for a woman. So it's common. By itself, yeast isn't bad. However, it just depends on the type of yeast it is. If it is a fermented yeast living off of sugars, then most likely in your gut, it's going to promote unhealthy flora, right? Unhealthy bacteria in your gut. But there are other types of yeast that aren't, living off of sugars that have some beneficial qualities. I don't know if you ever cook or pop popcorn in your home. I don't know if that's a sort of a common thing in Thailand, but in the States, there's a lot of people, we make popcorn, and you can buy a powdered product called Nutritional yeast at your local store. And if you sprinkle a little bit of Nutritional yeast on your popcorn, it actually gives it a buttery flavor. And that yeast is not bad for you. Now those yeast cells they're dead, which is a lot of powdered foods. It's dead in that regard, but it still maintains some nutritional value. But just because it's called Nutritional yeast doesn't mean that when it goes into your gut, it promotes unhealthy bacteria. It does not. And so just by itself, the word yeast isn't necessarily a trigger to mean it's automatically bad. But what I don't know, because the details on their website are just vague in terms of yeast, it just simply says yeast extract. And so the sourcing of that is almost impossible to know.
I think there's a lot to learn about food these days, Eddie.
It is, and maybe the more sophisticated we become, the harder it is, right? Because at least in the States, in fact, I've got a webinar I'm doing on Wednesday night where we're talking about, and I think you and I have talked about it before, about labels. You can get away with a lot on labels, right? People are not necessarily transparent on their labels. The one thing we do is we publish every ingredient we have on our labels, but that's by choice, not because it's required. Which I think makes it very difficult for consumers to know what brands to buy and sort of exactly what they're getting. It's a challenge. You almost have to be an expert to walk down the grocery store aisle, right, and pick up labels. But it may be difficult. It doesn't mean anybody should not do it, though. You at least need to understand. Here's what I tell folks: at least understand the macro issues, which are how many calories are coming from carbohydrates, how many calories are coming from fat, and how many calories are coming from protein. So if you just start with those three and you buy things that have a balance, I'm very leery of things that are fat-free, that are made food. Now, fruit and vegetables, obviously, exception of avocados and things like that, are fat-free. That's not what I'm saying. But if you're buying a product in the store that doesn't have a balance, I'm worried about that because it most likely has something else in there to create that same mouthfeel or some other artificial ingredient. So as a consumer, just learn to look at the label, at least know the calories, carbohydrates, fats, and proteins. And if you want to get a little more sophisticated, learn to recognize the type of fat. Is it saturated, polyunsaturated, monounsaturated? That's a thing to know for your cardiovascular health. So this is just about being aware and conscious. And if you do that, at least you're ahead of most people.
When I was very young, I didn't have to read all the labels because before eating, but these days we have to look and check before eating, before buying. And we have to be able to trust the labels as well. So we have to, right, Eddie, before we buy stuff.
Yeah, that's exactly right. I know what you're saying. When I was 18 years old in high school, I could eat before I went out with my friends, and I could eat when I got home that night, I could eat 3 or 4 or 5 meals a day and wake up the same weight as before. And now it feels like at age 56, I can look at a buffet and gain weight. So it's not fair, but it's what we have to deal with in life, right?
Okay, Eddie, thank you very much for your information today. And then I think I will go back. Maybe I will eat Beyond Meat like once in a while, but not that often because I don't know. Let's see.
Yeah, and you've shared with us on the show that you're working hard on being a healthy vegan, and so this is a chance for you to get a taste of something maybe from the past that's a vegan product. So I think that's okay. A little bit of anything's okay, right? Balance, moderation.
Yeah. Because when we eat vegan, like mostly raw and no taste, right? But when we eat something, so we can feel immediately. That's different.
That's exactly right. There's a sensation there, right? It can be comfortable.
Okay, Eddie, thank you very much for being here with us. So we'll see you again next time. Okay, bye-bye.
Bye-bye now.
Bye.